All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn, Unlocking the Potential, Exploring Rural Recruitment and Welcoming Strategies. My name is Brandon Hofstad, and I'm the Community Economic Development Program Manager with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, and it's my pleasure to kick off today's webinar. Before we begin, I would like to thank the U.S. Economic Development Administration. Today's webinar was made possible in part by a grant from the U.S. EDA in support of the EDA University Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. As per usual, we do have a few housekeeping items before we begin. Today's meeting is being recorded and the final video will be posted on our website, and in just a short bit, I'll drop that URL so you have access to it. All recordings and supporting materials, resources, PowerPoint presentations will be located on that website for your use and to share with others. The webinar does have closed captioning. You can find that if you need it at the bottom by hitting the CC on the ribbon at the bottom of your screen. As a friendly reminder, please be sure to mute your microphones when you are not speaking. We will have an opportunity later in the presentation following our presenters to ask some questions. But if you do feel like you want to ask questions during the presentation, please feel free to drop that in the chat. And if there is a moment for the presenters to answer it, we will answer some of those during that, but we'll save most of the questions for after the presentation today. If you don't feel comfortable asking out loud or sending it in a chat to everyone, you can also send a private chat to myself. Again, you can find me at the top of the participant list, Brandon Hofstad, or my colleague Todd Barman, who will also be located at the top of your participant list. You can send us a chat. So today's webinar will focus on creating an inviting environment to attract prospective residents and foster long-term rural community success. This webinar will dive into the world of rural recruitment and welcoming strategies, drawing inspiration from successful initiatives in Minnesota communities and highlighting practical tools and insights that can be applied here in Wisconsin communities. Today we have two presenters, Neil Linscheid and Dee Dee Lemire. And I will introduce both of them in part, and I'll start with Neil. So Neil is an extension specialist in entrepreneurship at the University of Minnesota Extension. His work focuses on supporting local leaders as they navigate economic changes taking place in their community. His mission is to teach, coach, and connect local leaders as they try to make informed decisions about their community's economic future. And Dee Dee is an extension educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. Dee Dee has a background in workforce development, higher education, and sales. As an educator, her work engages tourism communities statewide and brings Extension's community economics programming to North Central Minnesota. So with that, I will now turn the floor over to Neil and Dee Dee to talk about rural recruitment and welcoming strategies.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We are excited to be here. We're excited to share all the things that we've been learning over the past several years about this topic, and I'm particularly enthusiastic because whenever we share these sorts of things, there's always new examples that come from other places that help inspire the people that I've been working with and serving in Minnesota. So we're excited to hear your reactions and the things that you see that are similar to what's happening in your world. So today, our presentation is going to follow this pattern. We're presenting this big idea of what does this whole resident recruitment and welcoming thing look like together, and how do we think about that from the perspective of a community leader that wants to have an impact on this situation. So that's the big idea we're starting with, and what we'll walk through is following maybe a person in time, thinking about that newcomer, that person you're recruiting, and where you might have opportunities in their experience in coming to your community and making it their home over time. So we'll talk about these questions that are around each of these big topics. For instance, when we say understand is the first step here for your strategy, how will you learn about the experience of becoming a newcomer in your community? And that's a really tangible thing that you can answer and you can think about in your place. You can take steps to do that. And for each of these, we'll do the following. And by the end, what my suggestion will be is that if you answered all of the questions in this on how you'll do this, and you give those some specifics, and you really think about what you're doing right now and how you could improve that, you'd have a really solid strategy for recruiting and welcoming and engaging and belonging and all of these pieces. And that would be enough to get you going and make some positive things happen. At least that's what we've been seeing across our state. So that's where we're headed. That's what we'll get into. And there's a lot to cover. So treat this as a survey. We're going to cover some of these things. And there's a lot that we could talk about in any one of these boxes. And that's okay. That there'll be more to say and more to look at in the future. So let's talk about this idea of understanding. And this is something that maybe in your community you've thought about, or maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't thought, we should really find out, what is it like to be a newcomer here? What's it like to be a new person or someone that's thinking about moving here? What we've seen across Minnesota are a variety of ways that people answer this question. How will we learn about who the folks are that move to our community? They've conducted focus groups where they ask them, why did you move here? What is it that brought you here? What could be improved about this whole process of becoming a new resident in our place? They conduct interviews. Sometimes those are formal, where we're gathering information in a really systematic way. Other times it's just, let's talk. Let's find out what's happening, and with the purpose of understanding what was that motivated you or brought you here. Sometimes we have people, and in our state, I'll share some results that we've had where we want to be even more systematic, and we survey, intentionally survey the new folks that have moved in and find out what it is that brought them here, what's challenging, where are their opportunities. Another unexpected way that you might be thinking about understanding newcomers is through events. We have good examples of people that have held annual events, semi-annual events that are focused entirely on bringing those newcomers into the community, serving a meal, talking about the place, and getting people to know each other. And there's a lot we could talk about on that and any one of these. But I want to focus on just some of the things that we think are really within your grasp. My colleague Ben Winchester here at Minnesota, he's for several years looked at cohort changes in population change over the census periods. And what Ben saw a few years back was that in rural counties, although the overall population was declining, there was this change in these cohorts, maybe the 30 and 40-year-olds, maybe there's more 10 to 14-year-olds in these places. And this was just sort of something that was popping up. Oh, we're losing these 15, 18, 20-year-olds, but we're gaining all these other people. It's just not enough to offset that big change in the number of people in their 20s that we're seeing. So he looked at a few other counties, and we saw, well, recreational amenities, your population might be growing, might be happening in a county in Wisconsin that has a lot of recreational amenities. There's still this trend of those younger people leaving, but there's these big trends of, wow, the people that are coming in their 30s are bringing kids. Maybe they're retired. This is interesting. We wanted to know more, and we also wanted to know what it looked like when we compared it to metropolitan counties, and saw it was almost the reverse. That you're gaining these 20-year-olds, but losing people in these other cohorts. So that really led us on a multi-year journey to understand what was happening. And we've partnered with the University of Nebraska. We've partnered with the University of Montana Extension and several other groups over that time to survey newcomers, to really be intentional and find out what is happening. We know that something's happening here. We know that there's people coming in and going all the time. What is it that is making that happen for them? And what insights can we bring if we try to understand that situation? And what we found through some of those studies is just that people were interested in, it wasn't a one single thing that brought people to a community. It wasn't always a job. So 31% move primarily for a job when we've done these surveys. Some, but just a quarter, had lived there previously. The people that were moving in were highly educated, had big potential to bring income into the community, and about half had children in the household. This was done before the pandemic, so we were seeing telecommuting also what was a rising trend. It might even be higher today if we redid this. And we compared the same study to the results we were seeing in Montana, and that's what you see here. You see, wow, our perception that it was just for a job maybe isn't true for everyone, or that you had to graduate from high school to want to live in this community. Maybe that's not true either, or you have some previous connection. That might not be the case, or that it's always families that are coming in. All of these we were finding really helpful, and we could help advise our partners in communities on, what are the messages that you might be wanting to communicate to these newcomers as they're thinking about moving to your community. And some consistent patterns that we saw for those messages were around simpler pace of life. People would tell us that in our focus groups and interviews and surveys, that they're interested in something like a simpler pace of life, that they're interested in safety and security. And images like this, our friends in Nebraska had done research on what images really resonate. And this image of a kid on a bike in a street brings a lot of emotion and idea about the safety and security to people when they viewed those. But also low cost of housing. This was also important to people. People are seeing that there's potential to maybe have that mortgage be a little bit less of their overall budget, and that's appealing to them if they can make everything else work. So we had a variety of ways of doing this, and as you're thinking about your strategy, where we come from is to say, hey, we have information that we've gathered at the state level. There's information that you can gather in your community. And what I want you to do is just take a moment and think about, in your place, what are you doing right now to better understand newcomers? Is it a survey? Is it focus groups? Is it systematic? Is it sort of haphazard? Just take a moment to think about that. Maybe write a little note, because then you'll be 1/8 of the way there on your strategy in your community on, what are you doing right now? Maybe there's some potential to do more. But again, our survey has to continue. So the other thing that we've learned is, if you're learning about newcomers, you probably want to send some information out. You want to get your message out to them. You're not just learning about who they are and what they're interested in solely to connect with the people that are there, but you also are hoping that you could get your message about what your community offers out to community or to people more broadly, and that that you have people that might be looking at your community, and you want them to capture the opportunities, capture the good assets that you have, and not have to struggle to find those things. And that's where we think this phase of marketing comes in. And we have a paper that Brandon shared that we wrote with our Department of Employment and Economic Development that describes some of these efforts across our state to market to new residents. And I'll show you a few examples here, but there's kind of a difference that Dee Dee's going to get into, and that's that when we're talking about marketing, we're telling the story, we're we're framing our place for people, letting them understand what it is. And then we move into recruitment, and that'll be slightly different that Dee Dee will talk to. The images that you see here are all groups that do marketing to some degree. They're telling the story of their place. They're putting materials together. And one that I want to focus on is called Live Wide Open, and that's in West Central Minnesota. And they put together a series of videos. This is something that you could do in your community too. These videos are showing what it's like to be a new resident in the community. And I want to show you one of those that was recently put on their site.
I was born in Fiji. Fiji, a small island country in the South Pacific. I was there for like most of my life. Till 2010, I moved to United States. So when I came to United States, I came and I was with my mom's sister, my aunt in California. I couldn't get a job there. It was very hard to find a job. I didn't even get a job at McDonald's. So through Facebook, social media, my friend, she was in Washington State and her husband owned a business. So I worked there till COVID struck and restaurant business was dead completely. My roommate, he's from Battle Lake, Minnesota. So he said, if you want to come over to Minnesota, you can try something different here. So I moved to Minnesota in September of 2020. I did ice fishing for the first time. I never did that, so that was fun. I was going after walleyes, but I couldn't get any. But yeah, it was fun. Ice fishing was completely different for me. People are very nice. That's a big difference I see here compared to Washington State and people here. There's a big difference about the people, how they behave, how they interact with people.
Willow Creek is a 28-bed assisted living facility. Throughout all of long-term care and assisted living facilities, staffing is a struggle. So I had run ads and Banish actually applied for the position, and it kind of stayed on my desk for a while, 2-3 weeks, and I'm like, boy, I just need to call him. I need to meet this guy. So we did, and I remember when he answered the phone, I said, are you still looking for a job? He said, I've been waiting for you to call me.
My job description here is a universal worker and a cook. So that's like a dual role I play. So universal worker, we help with the residents with their daily activities, pass on meds also, set up by the nurses.
I'm going to stop there and just give you, hopefully encouragement to check out the Live Wide Open page, their website, also their YouTube channels. You can watch the rest of this video and many more, but just to give you a sense of what's important there in marketing. We're hearing someone's story. They're telling us what it's like to be connected to a place, telling us their journey to moving to that place and the things that they encountered, and also their a true story of how you feel about living there. That's a very powerful message. And Live Wide Open is an example where they do this on all sorts of media. They're on video, they're on social media, they're also on their website. They write stories and profiles of newcomers. And who is that audience? That audience is people that are thinking about moving there and wondering if they could see themselves in that place. And that's a powerful, important thing that you might be inspired to do in your place, or maybe you're already doing. So maybe we can ask this question again. Take a moment, write down that, one sentence. What are you doing to market your community? What does that look like for you? Is there a lot going on? Maybe you have something like Live Wide Open, big portfolio of things, or maybe your community is just getting started. You're just starting to think about that, what that is. But just take a moment to think about that. And while you do, I'll be handing this over to Dee Dee to talk about the recruitment side of this. What's different from marketing and recruitment, and what are we seeing in some of our communities in Minnesota?
Thank you very much, Neil. So I want to make sure to give you just a moment to write down your thoughts about that marketing piece. But in transitioning to thinking about recruitment, there was something about the video that you shared just now, Neil, that really stands out to me when we're thinking of the power of moving from just sort of a marketing piece into this bigger activity around recruitment. And that is that the individual profiled received an invitation from a trusted source of like, why don't you try Minnesota? Why don't you come to Battle Lake and try this? And I think that's really the power of, taking it beyond just having some, a slick brochure or, that sort of marketing presence, but really to thinking about how are we building an invitation? How are we moving into a space where there is that relationship and that connection that helps sort of get that ball rolling so that people could see themselves building a life in your community. Now, full disclosure, as we go into talking about this 218 relocate, I am actually a rural rebounder where I had moved away from the 218 area code and then came back just a few years ago. And so there's a lot of this that I really relate to very closely. But Neil, if you want to go ahead and play this little video and then we'll kind of talk through it. So I really invite you to pay attention to the messages and the way that they're framing this particular little video here.
Need a change of scenery and room to roam? Maybe you've been thinking of a simpler life in a community that is just the right size, where you can enjoy the great outdoors and the peace of mind that Northern living brings. The 218 Relocate program offers remote workers free incentives to move to and thrive in Bemidji, Minnesota. Get $2,500 in reimbursed moving expenses, including gigabit high-speed internet service, a 1-year membership to our co-working space, The Launchpad, free access to the Community Concierge Program, and teleworking support through effective remote work. Apply online at 218relocate.com and fill out a simple application form. 218 Relocate to Bemidji. Choose your lifestyle. Live and work in the Northland. Need a change of scenery and room to roam? Maybe you've been thinking of a simpler.
Thank you. It's so good. We'll just need to hear it twice. So I'm curious, what stands out to you from that? What I notice is that the messaging is all focused on the individual that's being asked to move and to consider joining the community. And the messaging starts out right away, with exactly what the research that Neil was a part of and shared earlier of, really thinking about those lifestyle components. It starts with that. But it also remains that way through this entire little snippet. And I think that's really important when we're thinking about our communities, because sometimes, whether it's in tourism or
Need a change of scenery and room to roam?
Oh my
Maybe
gosh,
you've been
so good. We're going to hear it 3 times. If you want to, I was going to say, if you want to move the slide so it doesn't happen again, but sorry. What I was going to say was that when we're talking about tourism or community development, community economics, I think sometimes we can spend a lot of time talking about all of the amenities, but we aren't necessarily taking that time to really transition to that. So what? Why does it matter to our audience? And instead can risk really flooding people with a lot of information that maybe isn't curated in a way that makes it accessible and manageable for them to take in. So that video is an example of really centering the audience, and that was done as sort of an initial outreach effort by the 218 Relocate. I strongly encourage you to check out their website to see how that has evolved, and they're doing some pretty sophisticated work now around resident recruitment. The slide that's up now is with the Western Minnesota Prairie Waters. And I think this is a really great example of where, all of those different amenities and things that communities have to offer to folks joining their community have been curated and packaged and put together in a way that is very accessible and meaningful from that user, that end user perspective. So for this organization, they've categorize this as community lifestyle toolkits that I think is really powerful, but they're digging into, what is it actually like to live here, to look at childcare, to look at recreation, employment, housing, all of those kinds of wraparound things. And I especially really like this approach because even if there's folks like me that are from an area, I left the community as a high school graduate, but now returning, I'm a parent. I was looking to purchase a home. There are all of these things that I actually had no experience of navigating for myself in my own hometown community and hometown region. So even if people are very familiar with your community in some regards, often they are coming in with some additional identities and some additional needs and ways that they need to be able to access resources in your community that they maybe didn't have cause to know about previously. So when you're thinking about that recruitment, I'm curious, what are you doing to recruit those new residents to your community? How are you really thinking about what are those needs that they may have as they're considering moving? What resources do we have? What ways are we able to connect them to those resources in a way that's meaningful for them?
Another way that you can think about recruitment is, how are we going to close the deal? If we have spent all this money and these resources and effort getting people interested in our place, understanding what messages might resonate with them, understanding things that we need to do to make our place more attractive to them. And it comes down to this point of they're really going to make a decision. That's what recruitment's about. That's what these resources are all about in helping you understand. So another way to say this is, how are you going to close the deal? How are you going to make it so that they say yes to your place and your community and they feel good about that? I really think that if we're putting all of this effort, which many groups are, into the marketing, into the recruitment phase, that effort could all be for really nothing if we don't have a really strong welcome to that community. This is the pivot point for your strategy in your community. We're working really hard and we want this welcome to be the start of your new life there. And think about what a welcome really is. It's the start of a new relationship. And this, in your case, it might be the start of a new relationship with your community and with this person who's moving there with this community. I've thought about this in terms of a continuum. We could, and that continuum is based on what resources, what assets you have available to you. For some communities, they might just have the ability to do some basic materials like the welcoming materials, the packet, the welcome bag, that sort of thing. And they can distribute those to new people when they get there. And that's great. If that's what you can do, that's a great start. You'll learn a lot from the new people by just distributing those. The other things that you might be thinking about as you move across this continuum of engagement might be like the welcome wagon. Now we're not just giving information to people, handing it out, but we're really engaging things, saying hello in person, or we're having events where we're bringing not just existing residents, or not just newcomers, but newcomers plus existing residents together to build community and to show that this welcome is happening, being intentional about that. Where I think the next frontier for many communities might be is to really think more deeply about, do we have a welcoming place? We can do these welcoming things, but we might be interested in asking, is this place welcoming? Is this the culture of our place welcoming? Is the environment that we've created welcoming? And that, I would say, is a sustained welcoming initiative. You're asking the hard questions about what it's like to be here. You're really thinking about, is everyone welcome? Or are there folks that don't get the same welcome that others do? For instance, sometimes if you're in a community that has a need for maybe medical professionals, the welcome wagon for a potential doctor in your community is a red carpet, but for the worker at the plant, that might look very different, and it might be inequitable in many ways. So that's where this sustained effort really has to come in, and people have to be thinking more broadly and more deeply about that work. But I don't always think that you can start there. So this is why we show this as a continuum. In many of those surveys that I mentioned earlier, we've asked people to rate, is their community welcoming? And we've also asked them, how likely are you to stay here or to live here in 5 years? And when people say that their community is welcoming and they strongly agree with that, they're also saying, I plan to live here in 5 years. And when they're saying that they disagree with that statement, that the community is welcoming, we're seeing them say less likely to be here in 5 years. This is just one of those data points that we've been curious about and wanted to know, does this welcoming thing really matter to people? And it seems like it does. This is one area that's pointing toward it. Now, many of the communities that we've worked with and interacted with across Minnesota have really found that the Welcoming America Welcoming Week is a really strong tactic that people are it resonates with them. We can be a part of Welcoming Week. We can do these welcoming activities. And I just want to encourage you to look at the things that Welcoming America has. If welcoming is maybe that point in your strategy that you think you could do the most additional work in. They also have resources that can help you understand that welcoming place side of the equation as well. So thinking your strategy again, should have an answer to what are we doing to welcome new residents to this community? What are you doing today? Are there opportunities to do more? That's a great topic of conversation that you can have with your neighbors and your friends, and all of us, wherever we live, can have this conversation, and we can find things that are tangible and that are reasonable for us to do, that we can just make that welcome one step better. As we move through this continuum of your strategy, we want to just think about it in time. We welcome people, and the worst possible scenario would be that we did all this recruitment effort and we had these materials, we welcome them, and then they never hear from us again. And that can happen. I'm sure it's happened. Maybe some of us on this call, that's happened to us, right? So we have just some examples here of what can you continue to do to engage newcomers, to be a part, bring them into the community and have them be a part of your community, and have that be a process that is intentional again. We'll talk about the Grab a Bite program, but the neighbors and newcomers point here is just a Facebook group. That is, we see this in many communities, that are you new in the community? Join the neighbors and newcomers group. Sometimes you might hold events. Sometimes you might just be a Facebook group. There's a wide variety in how these show up. Or the newcomer supper. We mentioned that a few times. Just getting people together to bring them in. We've had people say, if you feel like a newcomer, you're invited. People always ask, well, am I a newcomer? I've been here for 3 years. Do you feel like a newcomer? Yes, you're invited. Come on, join in. It's great. Don't be too prescriptive about how you push people out. It's all about bringing people in. We've also had people where they say, let's just make small asks. Will you bake a pie for the upcoming fundraiser? That's a small ask. Just an opportunity to get to know you, to be engaged as a newcomer. The one I want to focus on, and I'll encourage you all to Google Grab a Bite program or the Otter Tail County and the work that they're doing. This is a project that they've been doing in Otter Tail County, Minnesota. And the whole purpose is, we have a group of people that are willing to take you out to lunch, to grab a bite. Okay. If you're new to town and you say, I'd like to participate, we have people that are ready to go. They get the bat signal. They're gone. They're coming. You'll have lunch, but there's some rules. You can't ask people to buy anything or join or become your customer. You can't let them pay for the meal, and you shouldn't make any assumptions or gossip or disparage the community. But you should ask them what they enjoy about living here or where they used to live, what they care about, what they're interested in learning more about in the community, and see yourself as a connector. We all have connections in our communities that are very valuable to someone with none. And it's about sharing those and being generous with those. So again, Google Grab a Bite. This is one way to engage. So just think about it again in your one sentence plan for your community. Where are you engaging with those newcomers after that welcome? If you have a welcome, is there something intentional that you have? Write that down. Maybe there's an idea that's popping into your mind that you could say, we could improve a little bit there. We could find some new ways to engage. Just take a small step and write down your note. You'll almost have, well, you're halfway through your plan already if you're doing what I suggested. But we want to push past that, right? So it's fun to be welcomed. It's fun to be engaged, kind of feel like you're engaged, but it's even better to feel like you belong in a community and that this place is your place, and that you are, that you're with your people in a place and in a community. And this is where we want to encourage people to push even further and say, well, how do we get to the point where you feel like you belong? And here's an example we have. This is a group in St. James, Minnesota. It's called Uniting Cultures. And Uniting Cultures actually formed because two groups of women were meeting independently, and they were kind of social clubs. One was a Spanish-speaking group, one was an English-speaking group, and they realized that this was happening and said, you know what, we could meet together, and what would happen if we did? And they formed this new group called Uniting Cultures that is focused on welcoming people, but also creating a place that values everyone's story and life experience and contributions to the community, and cultivates this sense of belonging, and that everyone that is here belongs here. They've actually written a book on people's stories moving to the community, and it's an amazing book. That was how they made some of this real. They hold events like a cultural fiesta. They hold meetings and have speakers. This is a group that is actively working at it all the time, trying to make it so that these cultural differences that we all have with each other are not barriers to feeling like you belong or that you're connected to other people. And what we want here with belonging is this anti-outcome. We don't want people to say, I've lived here for 40 years, but I still feel like a newcomer. The person that told me that had been the mayor of their community, had been the chair of a community foundation board and the EDA. They had been involved in the Chamber of Commerce. They led the town festival, everything. Bingo card was totally full. And this person would still say, I still feel like a newcomer. That something's wrong with that. Or how do I need to donate more blood to this community to feel like I belong here and that I'm accepted? If you're wondering whether you have a belonging issue you could work on, all you have to do is listen for these sorts of things. This will be your breadcrumbs to say, oh, there's work we could do here. But again, we're back to your plan. So what's your sentence? What are you doing to help new residents feel like they belong in your community? Maybe there's some ideas that you have that you could work on if you're not satisfied with your answers. But I got news for you. Everyone, despite all of our best efforts, will leave eventually. They're going to leave your community. I know it could be morbid to think about it. But people leave for a lot of reasons. Young people, they might leave for educational opportunities to make their career. People leave because they found an opportunity elsewhere. They have to pursue it. Sometimes people leave for negative reasons. They don't want to live there anymore. That happens. Sure, let's not avoid that possibility. Sometimes people leave for family that pulls them to other places, and they have to make these deep choices about where they want to live. But what we want in our communities, what we hope to cultivate, is this idea that even if you don't live here, you still call it home. That this is where you think of as your home. And we can continue it. Leaving in a small town doesn't have to be that you left and now you're cut off from everyone. I'm sure that that's happened. Maybe you've seen that happen, or you've experienced that. Communities can say, hey, we understand that you left, but we want to stay connected. We had one person tell us that when they left their community, they got several notes about what impact they had on that place from people that from the community they were leaving, and those notes of gratitude and thank you were the kind of thing that this person said, they're on my corkboard in my office. Like, I look at those. That is a really, when you're looking for your next place to live, and that's on your corkboard, that might be the candidate for the next place to live, is a place that connected with you and people that connected you in that way. But you can certainly think about all of these other possibilities, from farewell parties to newsletters to just regular check-ins, and thinking about those folks that have moved away as potential people that could come back. Or I'm sure you have examples of these like we do, people that when you ask will send you a check or write you into their will as a place that they want to support, because again, this was home to them. So in your strategy, what we will encourage you to think about, what we see others thinking about, is what are you doing to stay connected to the people that leave your community? How are you staying connected in a part of their life as a place, and encouraging them that your community is a place that can still be their community? So before we wrap up here, I just want to note a few important things that we've noticed, and that's the practical implication or implementation puzzle. Just, if you want to do any of the things that I just described, you'll have to answer questions about how will we fund this? We want to have a welcome bag. How do we get the stuff to put in the bag? And what is that stuff? Where does it come from? If we want to have a community concierge, who will do that? And funding goes hand in hand with coordination. Some of these things are free, but require you're free in dollar sense, but require time and effort to coordinate and to manage. And there's been what we've seen is kind of there's potential for conflict within communities. If one group is assigned this sort of work, you're in charge of welcoming newcomers, and they don't see that as their mission. Maybe the chamber in your community is not the place for this. Maybe the tourism group is not designed to welcome newcomers. Maybe the city government isn't, or whatever. It's understanding that there's a negotiation that has to take place on the coordination, funding, and management. The Grab a Bite program that we mentioned is a county-funded initiative. The guy who runs it is a rural rebound coordinator. His name is Eric Osberg. The Live Wide Open program is through a community foundation called the West Central Initiative Foundation. And then we have examples of individual cities and counties working together. So it is a puzzle, and it's a puzzle that you'll have to work together with others to solve. So this is where we'll end today, is just saying, again, this is a continuum, and what we're arguing and what we're hoping that you'll leave with today is that if you answer these questions, whether in a spreadsheet, whether on a napkin, whether it's on a digital document, whether it's on a legal notepad, whatever that might be, and you're talking with others in your community, that you'll be on your way to having a strategy that is effective and that covers the whole spectrum of experience of people thinking about moving to your community, and trying to be engaged and stay with your community for the long haul. So that is where we want to end today. And I want to thank you all for joining us, give you this invitation to connect with me, with Dee Dee, with Ben Winchester on our team, or really any of our folks in University of Minnesota Extension. We're happy to share much more about the things that we've learned over time in this work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Neil and Dee Dee. We do have some questions in the chat. And again, if you are interested or you have questions for our presenters, please feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can ask the question by unmuting. But we'll start with the first question that came a little bit ago. So this is from Jeff. Jeff asks, have the communities measured the success of marketing and recruitment campaigns? And if so, can you please describe?
Yeah, so we've had some examples of this. Let's see, I'm trying to think of the name. So Fairmont, Minnesota, a few years ago, they have this Neighbors and Newcomers initiative. And one of the things that they decided to do was to do a billboard campaign as well as a digital marketing campaign. And so that looked a lot like a very traditional marketing campaign for them. So they were able to track the exposure for those things, the kind of website hits that came about, and they found that it was very challenging to then connect those to the is this a person that moved? But they had a few examples. It just wasn't like could we do a regression on this? I don't think it got to that level for them. And that's actually been something that has come up with this group that we've convened over the years of welcoming and recruitment initiatives. We try to bring them together and have Zoom meetings where they can talk about the work that they're doing. And I think we've had several sessions where people have talked about how do we measure the impact of this? And so far it is like web hits, it's the social media interactions, and it's been some follow-up interviews where people that have moved, they ask, like, how did you hear about this? And what are the things that have mattered for you in that? What I think we know is that it's very unlikely that it's going to be any one of these things, but a collection of these things, plus the physical, like the tacit experience of coming to a place that's going to make a difference for people. And then there's a good portion of them that they'll just tell you, like, I knew I was going to move here. All this other stuff was great, but I already knew that this was going to happen.
I think related to that might be, Dee Dee, you had mentioned the 218 area code recruitment effort. Did they track hits, the number of people who actually filled out that application?
I am not particular with that. Or I'm not familiar with that particular detail, and I'm not sure if Neil is.
Yeah,
I do know that they're running a very sophisticated program, so I would expect that they're able to track that for the web clicks and things.
Yeah, and they certainly have been tracking it through the clicks, but also when you fill out the application. So that's that next step, right? Now there's a call to action. If people fill this out, now we know they're taking a step here. It's like, put it in the shopping cart. I'm ready to do this. And that triggers more interaction with those folks. So I'm sure if we had the people that are running that, they could explain more about how they do that, how they approach that, and what they do as they move through that pipeline of interaction and communication.
There is another question. This is from Andy. Andy asked, is there any research that you're aware of that captures people leaving the community because it's not welcoming? And I would actually say also research on welcoming. So specifically about not welcoming.
Yeah. I don't know of anything, but again, my ignorance is not evidence of absence, or whatever that saying is. So maybe, but I don't know of anything. It's actually very hard to find out who newcomers are. And I think it's even harder to find out who the people that left are, and then track them down. That's when we have done the surveys with newcomers, we purchase a list from a national marketing database, and they're able to give you that list by people's address, and if it's changed in the last 3 years to that location. So maybe there's a way to do this, but I'm not aware of people have done that. It's also hard when you just sit back and think about it. If someone's not happy, are they really going to participate in your exit interview? Maybe they will. It sounds like a good opportunity.
Yeah, Neil, I think you might be able to capture it on the arrival end, in the sense that when they move into a new community, they've obviously left another. So if the new community start asking, why did you leave your other community? Then you might be able to indirectly get an idea how much the unwelcoming aspect of the other is contributing to it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that could definitely be a factor. I'd say let's just bring it to the community level, though. Like, what could you do in your community if you know that someone is leaving? You could try to do that exit interview. You could try to find those things out. That is within the realm of your possibilities with anyone who's a community leader. They're connected enough to know who's coming and going, and to spend 20 minutes and a cup of coffee talking about what it was like to live here, I'm sure would give you good insights to make practical choices on what you could do in your community, which is where I'll keep coming back to.
And I'm going to kind of pull on the thread of the welcoming a bit more. There is a question specifically about welcome centers, and then there's more that I'll kind of follow up with. But this is from Fernando asking about the impact of welcoming centers, if you have any insight on that. And Andy followed up that it sounds like Michigan, as well as I'm assuming other places across the Midwest, are potentially talking about closing up some of these convention bureaus or these destination organizations, because maybe they're not looked at as effective. But any idea on the impact of welcome centers?
So I guess I kind of need to think about what is a welcome center. Is it like welcome to Minnesota, and then it's like on the highway? There's you pull over and you get the brochures with the tourism stuff. Is that what you mean, Fernando? Or do you mean like there's some communities that have said, like, let's have a little kiosk where you could stop in our community and like welcome. It's not a highway thing. Yeah.
He did say that that's what he meant was.
Oh, okay.
First option. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to know. It'd be nice to know. Does anyone know? We have 100 people on here.
Feel free to chime in on the chat. I also would just say that to me, that really gets at the piece of really thinking about who your audience is. And there are certainly ways that we are well practiced in talking about our communities, but the audiences may not be the same audience. If we're talking to tourists and travelers and things, that's a different set of needs. That's a different focus. That's a different delivery mode. Whereas if we're talking to people that are looking to move to a community, they likely need a little different information, located in a little different place and time. So there's a lot of conversation happening in the tourism sector around that overlap. And much like these, great questions that you guys have asked, where it's like, God, it'd be really nice to track it. That is certainly our desire as well, but it also remains kind of elusive because, people may want to be moving for the lifestyle, but the reason, that they were finally able to actually make it happen was because they got a job offer so that they could buy a house. But really, maybe their motivation was the lifestyle. So those things can just be sort of like ambiguous and tricky to track. What I want to also revisit, Neil, too, is I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the chat. This is like rich. There are so many research questions that could come out of the questions that people are bringing up. So, hat tip to you all for being like really smart, thoughtful community developers. And I think what you all are kind of pointing to when you're thinking about, what does this mean for people that are newcomers, but maybe share some, really key cultural sort of identities with the community that they're moving to, versus if they're newcomers, but they may have a difference of language or some like really significant differences of culture. And the piece that grab a bite to me is such a powerful example, because what it does is actually articulates what is the shared culture that we're trying to move toward as a community. And I think that kind of approach can be used across all different kinds of welcoming activities between communities, but to sit down and to have those kinds of conversations, that to say, hey, we have a lot of people coming to our community that speak Spanish, or that are part of the Karen community. And like, what does that mean? How do we extend that welcome? And you can sit down and work with your community to articulate, what does this like shared cross-cultural welcome activity mean for us in this space, and can be applied in different ways, as there are emergent needs for your community.
And I'm guessing this could probably be in a completely additional webinar. But I think there's kind of a theme about Fernando started it, but how can welcoming communities deal with residents who have a strong sense of individualism, protecting their own turf, fear of newcomers or other stereotypes? And really, I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about when you've run into this and you're dealing with communities, like how do you sort of work through those challenges?
Yeah, that has come up, and it's come up across a range of interviews and focus groups that we've conducted, where we get to this topic of like, well, whose responsibility is it to connect in the community? And like, how should you go about that? And there's always a thread of people that say, it's up to you as the individual to get connected. It's up to you to like go find your opportunities. And there's good discussion about that. I wouldn't say that this is a settled point in the discussions that I've been a part of in the formal focus groups or in community decisions. But that certainly comes up. And I think what I try to do is encourage people to say, well, we're all different. And for some of us, that like willingness to connect, we're just very comfortable in doing that, and that's okay. But let's all agree that there might be others in this room that don't want to do that. That sounds like absolute torture for them, but we don't want to miss their perspective or their contributions to the community. And so those of us that are comfortable in that space, maybe we can help create situations that are easier to come in and connect with, and not just let those who don't see themselves as extroverts just languish and not feel like there's any opportunities for them. So I do think that there are ways to do that. I think that those ways will be different in every place, but it's that intention and that intention and attention to the fact that not everyone will think like that, that it will be important.
Great. I agree with Dee Dee. There are a lot of wonderful questions. To Glenn, you asked me if we are going to capture the chat questions. I will capture the chat questions. I'm going to share them with our presenters, and we can try to provide other resources to answer some of those. And maybe we'll have like an FAQ sort of section on this particular webinar if it seems appropriate. But I just want to say thank you so much to the presenters for taking the time to share the programming out of Minnesota with us in the state of Wisconsin, and others from across the country. And also everyone who's stuck around for this webinar. We really appreciate you showing up. Again, the final recording and additional resources will be online, and you can find it on our website. There will be a follow-up after today's webinar with that information. So with that, thank you for attending, and I hope to see you again on a future Lunch and Learn, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care.